Thanks for tuning in to Gene and Roger Talk Movies. I'm Roger.
Yeah, and I'm Gene, and Jamie didn't make it this today. So,
Yeah, Dad had to put his foot down on this particular film because today we are doing Robert Eggers' The Witch.
which pretty heavy content, and also Jamie's swimming practice is getting a little intense, so he had
Well,
he had to sleep.
intense swimming practice or one of the most intense movies I think we've done on this show so far. Gene, initial thoughts on The Witch?
Well, I feel like good horror should make you think about yourself, and it should make you feel uncomfortable, and I think this movie definitely does that. A period piece set in a Puritan New England, 16th century. So Robert Edgers, yeah, this movie's great, great, one of my favorite movies for sure. And also, I'm really stoked that we're reviewing an A24 movie. I'm definitely an A24 fan. A24, if you're to the uninitiated, it's like an independent movie house out of New York City, and they've made some of my I think they just came into existence in like 2012, 2011, around there. But their philosophy of backing movies is great, kind of letting the directors pursue their own vision. And they've definitely made a lot of my favorite movies, like Moonlight, mid-90s, Farewell, Low Tide, as well as others. So It Comes at Night, Hereditary. So, yeah. So I'm glad to be reviewing an A24.
Right, and I certainly will back up what Gene just said. One of the things that I really am disappointed with, I guess, with modern films is it's movie by committee. And so, you can't go down this road because this audience over here is going to be upset about it or whatever. And A24 really is a studio where a director says, hey, here's the movie I want to make. They say, here's the money to make that. Let us see it when you're done. And okay, we're going to release it now. And that's why you get really adult-oriented films like The Witch. And I think the beginning of this movie does not waste any time.
No, right to it. Boom.
You were talking about
No
Alien
intros.
a couple episodes ago where it's like really focused. Boy, this movie is laser focused on getting its point across. It's only 93 minutes long, and every single scene is leading ultimately towards the completion of this story. It begins with the family being kind of...
Should you give your disclaimer?
Oh, my disclaimer. Yes.
You got to give your disclaimer.
I am going to. Now, normally, of course, our podcast is all about you've seen the movie before. This movie, I'm almost recommending that if you have not seen the movie before, maybe stop the podcast right now.
Yeah, you should stop.
Go watch it, and then come back and listen to the rest. We'll be right here waiting for you when you do. Because the less you know about this film going in, the more interesting you will probably find it. Because the trailers for this movie kind of gave the wrong impression as to what this movie was. And so I think just watching it now and then coming back, and like I say, we'll be waiting for you. But anyway, it starts out with this Puritan family basically getting told, hey, you got to leave our Puritan community because...
Banished.
Yeah, you're going to be banished because they're kind of a separatist sect of the Puritans where, no, they're more pious than the community and this and that. And so they leave and set out to set up their own little farmstead.
Right.
And of course they pick, well, here's the scary woods right here, so we'll just build our farmhouse right outside the scary woods, right?
Yeah, this movie's loaded with symbolism, and that, instead of picking a clearing, of course you have to have a clearing for your farmhouse and for your agricultural land. But maybe instead of picking something like on top of a hill that's great vistas, no, they're kind of like in a little bit of a valley. And so the woods tower over their clearing. Since, I don't know, being in our modern urban environment, I don't know if like you or like, I guess I'm addressing the listeners, have really been out in the woods at night, by yourself. It's like, oh my gosh. It's like you can get transported back to the 17th century really quick. The woods at night, like I grew up in Colorado, a lot of camping and all that. It can be downright scary.
Right, and of course,
It's
in
not messing
Alaska,
around.
10 minutes from your house in any direction, you can pretty much be in the woods as well.
Right, but there's something about
Yeah.
being in the woods. It's night. There's it's real quiet, but there's noises around you, and you can't see very far. Yeah, there's something about that.
Yeah, and so the family is a father, his wife, and then the eldest daughter, who was played by Anya Taylor-Joy in her
Thomason.
on her initial movie debut was this film, and then the fraternal twins, and then there's a passage of time
Marcy and
when
Jonas.
right, Mercy and Jonas. Yes.
Mercy. Yeah,
I will
Mercy.
have a better time with the character names in this one because there's basically only 5 of them, but
6.
or 6.
7.
See there,
7.
we have a problem.
Including our favorite.
Right. Our favorite character is Black Phillip, who we'll get
Phillip.
into in a minute. But once they get to this plot of land, there is a passage of time because the next sequence shows that he has built a cabin there and he's starting to build a barn. He doesn't have the roof completely thatched. And
yeah, to throw in there, careful watching them. Not to say that, Roger, you weren't careful.
I've watched it 3 times in preparation for this.
Yeah, at the beginning you notice that Catherine, she's pregnant, like in the banishment hearings in the village, and so. But then later on, when they're in their farm, they have structures built and the baby's born.
Right.
So it definitely implies a little passage of time, but not a huge. The baby's 6-7 months old.
Yeah, very small.
Right.
And the other thing you'll notice about this film right from the beginning, the colors are completely washed out.
Right, very good.
And the director made a conscious decision to primarily use natural light in all sequences of this film. So even lighting an interior scene with candles, 3 or 4 candles. And so you really are transported back to 1630s, Massachusetts, New England.
Yeah, Massachusetts.
And it's interesting that the only color that is vivid and stands out is what color? Red, of course, right?
Yep.
And so you'll notice that throughout the film where it's very drab and bland colors, really setting the tone for that period of our time. And then, the red really stands out.
Yeah, and the red, of course, blood, but red appears also in other places, which we can get into.
Yeah, and so the movie, like I said, all this stuff we've talked about takes less than 2 minutes of movie time, basically, to get to the fact that then Thomason is kind of doing a little peekaboo game with the baby.
Baby, yep.
And it's a beautifully shot sequence there because it's focused directly on Thomason's face as she is moving her hands back and forth from her face.
Yeah, she's playing peekaboo, which everyone's done with the baby. We all know this.
And then she opens her hands up from her eyes, and then really nice acting again. This kind of look of bewilderment comes over Anya Taylor-Joy.
Well, just shock.
And then shock, and then, wow, the camera shows you that, the baby is not there anymore.
Right, the baby's gone, which is crazy because she's right over the baby at a distance of probably less than 2 feet.
Right.
And then the baby's just gone.
Mm-hmm. And
right from underneath
then
her.
the camera shows up towards the woods, and the woods are a good, I don't even know, Gene, 30 feet away from where she was.
30 feet. Good.
So it's like, wow, where did this baby go? The movie tells you immediately where the baby went because this movie is laser focused on what it's doing, and there's this cloaked figure.
Female cloaked figure.
Running off with it.
Yep.
And then for those of us that are horribly squeamish, she does a terrible thing to this little infant and basically turns the infant into ointment that can allow this witch to use her this is
definitely a horror movie. So clearly the baby's killed, with a knife, and she rubs the blood on her body and then on a stick. And the movie is very, very suggestive in that way, sexually suggestive. So definitely super adult films or adult themes going on here, adult ideas. So it doesn't show anything, and I appreciate the director going that route. It kind of just leaves it not up to your imagination, but it just doesn't. It leaves a lot of things unsaid, which I think in good horror can be more scary because your mind can take you to places that are infinitely more complex and diverse than if the director just showed you.
Right.
So it's good, really good storytelling, I thought.
Right. The unseen is sometimes better than the
Right,
seen,
right,
and
right.
we'll get into some more of that as we go along.
Right.
And then, of course, the baby's gone, and the mother is freaking out, and they're looking for the baby. And welcome to Puritan, well, just that age or that time period where
Right.
relatively quickly they're like writing the baby off, right?
Well, they search intently, and then
Yeah.
there's a big scene where the father, Tom or William, he just acknowledges, and he says pretty verbatim is that we cannot search anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're done searching. The baby would be dead if by hunger alone by now.
Right.
So, which is very pragmatic and is correct, right?
Mhm.
So
Oh, yeah.
then they can't search anymore. They're done searching, which is super tragic. And I think this movie it touches a lot on it's Puritan New England, so it has to touch on religion and faith,
Mhm.
God, and what their idea of God was. And it seems like right here that the whole again, you kind of want to generalize, but I put a disclaimer here. But it seems like in this movie that it seems, especially with Catherine, that she has a belief that in God that is kind of like based in like maybe a prosperity gospel, to use a modern phrase, is that if things are going well, God is with me. However, if events turn, especially if events turn dark, then God has left me. God has turned his back on me. And there's our scenes where Catherine is just praying to God intensely, after her baby disappears. And she says, God, please, give me the power to see your light and to see your joy. And she has a big conversation with William about that she had a dream once when she was young, and she was so in love with God, and she felt so close to him, but now that's impossible now, and that's gone. And so I think at that point you start to see because this family has this idea, you start to see this family's descent beginning.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up because the scene you're talking about with Catherine's dialogue there about being further away from God, that's actually later in the film.
It is later, yeah.
And really, when I was seeing that, and we're going to go off on a side tangent here,
Okay.
but when I saw that scene, because the only time there is really sunlight in this movie is when Caleb is leading Thomasin through the woods and Thomasin is on the horse. And Thomasin is talking about, remember the glass windows when we were back in England, right?
Right. She does.
And this sun is coming through, and to me it's like setting this scene of, yeah, it was really nice back there in England. We knew what our place was. We had this nice stuff. God was blessing us based on what you're saying. And what does Catherine say at the end of that speech that you just talked about? I want to go, because she says, I want to go home.
Right.
And William's like, well, it'll just be a day to the town and then we'll be back
Right.
here. And she's like, no, I want to go back to England.
Right.
And so
all the way back.
To me, it was like with the scene with Thomasin and Caleb, and the only time there's really sun coming through in this movie. And then that scene to me was kind of about, sometimes this thought of, I know better than the flock, so to speak, or the community, so to speak, actually leads me to my own destruction. And sometimes staying where you're at and making the best of it is really the best course of action for you. And I'm basing that just on those two scenes. And I thought it was beautiful that, if I'm right, and I could be completely wrong and just reading way too much into it, but
no,
the fact that the sun coming through with that Thomasin and Caleb scene, and what are they doing? They're just reminiscing about back in England and how nice it was.
Exactly.
And then following up with that scene with Catherine. But yeah, that's why this movie is so great, is there's all sorts of little, well, is that what the director really was meaning to say there? What was that about?
Right.
And there's just tons and tons of these little sequences. But they end up, of course, writing the baby off, so to speak. And
Yes.
the bigger issue with that baby, and one of the reasons I think Catherine was over the top with her praying to God, because she spent many days just
Yes.
lying in bed, praying, praying, praying.
And William says she spent many days not sleeping.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the biggest issue concerning that baby, though, was, for Catherine anyway, was the baby had not been baptized.
Right. The baby would be died in hell.
And so then the next sequence there is William taking Caleb out to the woods to set traps for live animals because their crops are starting to
They're
die.
starting to fail.
Right?
There's lots of rot. They can't eat them.
And you see that immediately early on, even before the baby disappears. There's a shot of Catherine breastfeeding the baby. She calls Thomason out, but they have this little garden behind them, and all the crops are withered right there, just in their little garden.
Right.
And
The
so,
if I can interject, the director also shows other clues that kind of like the things are not the way they should be, because even in their home seems to be like well put together. However, in the distance there's a barn, and the barn is clearly not finished yet.
right.
But you can see like the underpinnings, the structural foundations of it, but it's definitely not finished.
Right. The
and
roof
so-
had not been completely thatched. And,
right.
And he even mentions that he'll finish that barn at some point.
Right. So things are not.
Yeah. And
winter's coming,
yeah.
and so things are not ready.
Right. And so the dad takes Caleb out to the woods to set some traps for animals and things
Which brings
like
up
that.
another point.
Exactly. And
A
so
big point in this movie.
well, yeah, and go right ahead, Gene.
Yeah, because they didn't bring traps with them. So the father's recognizing things are not going well. And so, it's a big Puritan family, super devout to God. They're always praying. But what is a fundamental, a fundamental aspect of faith in Christianity, or at least it should be, is just honesty. You have to be honest. You have to be clear. You should be transparent. However, within this family, no, it's not like that. They say these prayers to God, but they have secrets. They are not open with each other. They do not share their feelings, and they're just accepting of their roles. And so what William had done is Catherine had brought all the way from England a family heirloom, a silver chalice.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, who knows what the backstory is, but she brought it all the way from England. Can you imagine the journey in one of those boats across the entire Atlantic Ocean? She brings the silver chalice. Great sentimental value. William had took it from her without her knowledge and had sold it so that he could purchase these traps. And he had set a lot of these traps into the woods so he could, catch animals. And so they went out, him and Caleb, breaking one of their rules to go into the woods.
Right. She did not want the kids.
She did not want the kids going into the woods. So right there's a couple violations. Selling the chalice is huge, but then taking Caleb into the woods is also big. And then another thing happens that I think really hammers the point that things are not right, is that they come across a rabbit.
It's the hare. Yeah. And
the hare,
this is
which
great
is,
because,
yeah.
of course, hares and rabbits just generally are not scary. This was a creepy little
scariest,
hare.
the scariest hare. How do you tell the difference between a hare and a rabbit?
Well,
is there?
I'm basing it just under witches and their relationship to hares. It's never said rabbits, so that has to be a hare.
Rabbits too. It's kind of a fun name. Oh, look at the rabbit.
Yeah, but to me it's because the story is right. Witches can turn themselves into hares in order to do all this mischievous stuff, and like the hare later in the film leads Caleb to the hovel.
So
but
anyway,
we're getting off track.
We're off track, yeah. But this is a scary hare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's got those eyes. It's got these eyes.
Well, and they set the camera up beautifully because it almost looks like the hare is staring you down.
Right.
You want a piece of me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The hare challenges him. You got that big gun. I'm right here. Okay, get me. And then who wins?
Yeah.
The hare.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. Because they set up the gun, of course, this magnificent old firearm, but modern to them. But you can tell, I think, the little backstory, it gives you a little backstory on this family, is that William, Catherine, their family is as well off. Like their history, they have had success in their life, and so I mean at that time it would have been a beautiful weapon. Certainly it was substantial, they had, yeah, so they were well off at one time. But William, he sets up the rifle, you got to prime it. You got to have the cord that sets off the primer. You've got to do all these things. He sets it off, and what happens? It misfires right in his face. And so I think the point is that the descent of the family has begun because William himself, he prays and is devout and he's trying his best, but ultimately you've got to have. We live in a real world. You've got to meet your needs of life. And William is not meeting the needs of life of his family. He's not a good farmer. He's not really a great builder. He's a poor hunter. The traps that they went out are empty. So he is not taking care of his family. And so I think it brings up the point is that you can have all the faith and the religion you want, but yet if you are not taking care of the basic needs of life, then you have got some serious problems.
Well, and I think there's a bigger sequence in that that scene when Caleb is talking to his dad about his concern over the baby, and I believe the baby's name was Sam. Was that right?
Sam, very good.
Yeah. Hey,
Sam.
look at that. Point for me.
Yeah.
But because he's gravely concerned that this kid was not baptized, and his belief is that, hey, is my brother burning in hell now?
Right.
And the father basically tells him that we can't make that determination, right? It's like a predestiny kind of thing, and the Lord knows if you belong in heaven or if you don't. And by the way, let's never talk about Sam again, which really confused Caleb.
Right.
And so that scene with what Gene was talking about, and then that dialogue sequence, that's the brilliance of this film. There is so much going on in every scene that really sets the stage for this entire film.
Right, and then I think you bring up a point too, is that conversation right there. William says, "Let's not talk about this ever again," and it incredibly confuses Caleb, because Caleb at this time he's an adolescent, prepubescent young boy, or I think she actually is probably entering puberty, and so and you've got a lot of things. This movie, it's photographed exceptionally well. A lot of things go unsaid, but there are a couple scenes where Caleb is looking at Thomason. He's and the photographers go out of the way to show that Caleb's looking at his sister in a kind of a curious way. And so Caleb's got a lot of questions. He's got a lot of things that I think are on his mind. But his dad just told him that, there are some things we're not going to talk about. So it kind of shuts the door on Caleb maybe, talking to his father about these emerging feelings that he's having. And so it kind of like, it gives a sense of, especially you see it for Caleb, and it's for the whole family too, the sense of, even though they're a family and they're together, each one of them is isolated. They're not sharing really what's going on in their lives. They're going through the motions. They're trying to fulfill the roles, but they're all isolated. They have their secrets, and it's kind of, these things tear this family apart.
Right, and this is also the sequence where William tells Caleb, "Yeah, I'm the one that sold your mom's chalice.
Right.
Don't tell her."
Of course.
And then that leads Caleb to lying to his mother in the next scene when they do come back from the woods. The mother's all frantic. "Hey, where were you guys?"
Yeah, and he makes up a story about apples.
Makes up a story about, I thought I saw an apple tree down in the valley. Turns out, no, I didn't. And then this is also when we see our favorite character, Black Phillip,
Black
hanging
Phillip.
out. And the thing I will also say about the silver chalice, how cool would it be if when he said, "Oh, I needed to get supplies with this," if one of the supplies he got was Black Phillip, right? Would that not play into the whole tone of this film, of this
Yeah.
continued transgressions against God or whatever, and you're stealing this cup, you're being secretive about it. The thing you bought was Black Phillip, which ultimately brings in the complete downfall of the family, right?
Right, but I think the movie it's not clear where.
No, it doesn't say that, but it's
They
a thing
probably
you
had
can
Black Phillip at the
infer
beginning.
in there.
Yeah, because they had a horse and they have 2 goats, and they probably had Black Phillip.
Yeah, and then the kids, the fraternal twins, who, yeah, I'm sorry, Gene, they are just creepy as hell.
When I was watching this movie, yeah, again I watched it multiple times, but the first watching is like Marcy and Jonas. There are their names, but as a parent, it's like you want your household to be, you want your kids to be, growing up and to have a sense of calmness. But these kids, Marcy and Jonas, they are the opposite of calm. They don't listen to their parents. They're disobedient. They totally ignore Thomasin. They don't do anything she says.
Right.
So, but in a way, it's just like they decline too, because at the beginning, where they're in the trial, so to speak, for their banishment, they're well behaved, and they seem to be well behaved at the beginning of the movie, but then later on, it just shows them getting more and more just out of control.
Well, and also during that sequence, though, they're singing the song about Black Phillip.
Yeah,
right?
they
And
somehow, yeah.
they are talking
right.
about there's a crown on his head. He is the
Right.
king of the land, this and that. So it's like, yep, Black Phillip's already kind of got you guys, you
Right.
two. You know?
Right, and they talk to Caleb and Mercy, sorry, Mercy and Jonas. They talk about that sometimes they talk to Black Phillip, which is super creepy. And then there's always singing these, like you said, these Black Phillip songs, and it's just like everyone tells them to be quiet, and they just keep singing it.
Right.
Yeah,
And it's like
they're like,
Black Phillip's telling them what to do at this
yeah,
point.
Black Phillip is like, and then another telling thing is like it deals with their prayer life, because they're always saying prayers, of course. And one of the big prayers they say is, the Lord's Prayer. And there's a scene, tragically after Caleb dies, the Mercy and Jonas, they say to everyone is, I can't remember my prayers. Everyone else, including Thomasin, they're all saying the prayers. But yeah, Mercy and Jonas say they can't remember.
Well, and we'll get into that more, because I do have
Right.
some theories, of course, about that. And this movie is all about this stuff. It's so well constructed.
Right.
But this Dudley, we've now set up that the dad is being deceitful.
Yep.
He's brought his son into, hey, it's okay to be deceitful. You just lied to your mother about
Right.
these apples.
Right.
Then there's a sequence
Well,
where
let's not talk about some things, which I
Right.
think is big.
And then it's the next sequence is the mother finally realizing that her silver chalice is gone and pretty much assuming that Thomasin is the one that took it. She's really
Right.
interrogating Thomasin.
Right.
The dad then jumps in going, hey, woman, the daughter says she doesn't know anything about it. Leave her
Right.
alone.
Right. And then he says, let's have a day of fasting tomorrow. Right. So William still is in denial. And denial meaning that he is not telling the truth to his
Right.
own wife. Right.
Yeah, and then that leads us into the scene where the father and the mother are in bed. Upstairs are the kids. They are kind of
Right.
going through kind of some of the hardships that they're facing right now. There's not going to be enough food, blah, blah, blah.
And the wife is Catherine. She is freaking
Yeah,
out.
she
is
is.
not helping.
Right, yeah.
She is not helping.
And boy, that woman, and I do not know her name, the actor.
Catherine, Kate Dickel.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Amazing,
In this film.
amazing.
Just, oh my gosh,
And-
there are some scenes of intensity off of her where I'm just like, oh my God, she's
Yeah,
an actor.
she adds a lot to the horror element for sure, and she seems to have a self-awareness, so she knows what she's turning into, and and in that conversation, she admits about the chalice to say, hey, we could have sold this thing,
Yep.
to help us out, and then she says to him, I'm sorry that I've turned into this shrill of a wife, I'm so sorry. So she knows what she's going through and how she's transforming, but she can't stop it.
Right. And so what this leads to is this plan of, since Thomason has now reached womanhood or whatever
Right, just probably 16.
yeah, they're going to ship her off back to the
Right,
town to work for
right.
some other family.
Right.
And
Thomason hears this.
of course, Thomason and the other children hear this.
Right.
And that leads then to Caleb deciding, well, I'm going to go check these traps early in the morning. And, if we can get this food, that means, Thomason, you won't have to
Right.
have to go.
He does a heroic thing.
Right.
Right.
And Thomason, of course, confronts him in the stable and is like, well, no, you need to bring me with you or I'm going to go tell mom and dad.
Right.
And so then that leads them into the woods. And
Right. Now they're both in the woods, which they were told never to do.
Right. And
they
I think this is then when we do get that sequence I talked about earlier with the sun coming through. The sun goes away very quickly after that line of dialogue is done with how nice it was in England. And then you're back in the darkness. The hare shows up again.
Right.
And they also have a dog. The dog runs off after the hare. Caleb runs off after the two of them,
Yep.
leaving Thomason on the horse. Thomason, of course, being a Puritan woman, she doesn't know how to ride a horse in the first place because Caleb's leading her through.
Yeah.
He's gone. The horse freaks out and bucks her off. And
Didn't the hare appear again?
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I didn't see the hare again. Caleb had run off after the hare.
After the dog.
The dog, which was chasing the hare.
Right.
And the whole point of that, in my mind anyway, because the witch had inhabited that hare, it was like, yeah, I'm leading you to the hovel. Right.
The hovel where the witch lives.
And,
and Caleb finds it.
And they have this nice sequence then where Thomason has fallen off the horse, knocked herself out. It fades to black. Right. Then it cuts to Caleb, man, going through the densest underbrush I've ever seen.
Yeah, by himself.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you still see the hare. Just, hey, keep coming. I'm right here. Come, you can get me.
Right.
And then it cuts to now he's standing in front of. Well, actually, it doesn't do that. It cuts to the parents looking for, and that's actually the only scene that's kind of funny. Do you remember that?
The parents are looking for them?
So it cuts back to William is yelling out for Thomason and Caleb, and the mother is there, and the camera slowly goes by the two twins. Yeah. Do you remember? And they're tied up to, they've got a rope on them to the thing, and they've got the bells on. It's like
the parents have such little faith in Mercy and Jonas that they have physically with a rope tied him to a fence post.
And they've got bells on. So
right. I did notice that, yes.
We'll be able to find you if you run off into the woods.
Right.
But
and they're off yelling. But however, William and Catherine are yelling. They themselves didn't go into the woods. They're right on the fringes.
Right.
They have not entered the woods.
Yeah,
but they're yelling as loud as they can from
Thomason does awaken from her being knocked out.
Right.
Runs to Dad, and then Dad says, overjoyed that he's found Thomason,
right.
and
then a couple things. A couple times he calls Thomason my girl, which I think is really important because what happens a little later. Yes, he loves. In a way, William loves Thomason. You can tell. Again, it's just portrayed through the movie is that he has a special relationship with her. And him saying my girl a couple times and just how he reacts and treats her. Yeah, I think they have a special relationship.
Right. And then he basically looks at Thomason and is like, where is thy brother or whatever.
Right.
And then it cuts to Caleb looking at the hovel, the witch's hovel.
Right. Which is surprising because, there's a structure here in the middle of the woods.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's smoke coming out of the chimney.
Yep.
It's
and
pretty
then
spooky looking.
This witch comes out, and again, really sexually suggestive woman. She's got
this
vivid red cloak on, of course, and again, that red color against all of the washed out colors. Yep. Okay, this is really popping out here. And then she basically seduces young Caleb, and the last sequence is she kisses him, and then this gnarly old hag hand comes
her
out.
hand transforms from this young 20-something into like an old, very, very old
Yeah. Yeah.
Extremely old. Yeah.
And then
Unearthly old.
and then from there it cuts back to Anya Taylor-Joy's character Thomasin is kind of wedged in a corner of the house, the cabin, and the mom is kind of medium shot, and then behind the mom, further away, is the dad, and the mom is again questioning Thomasin about what's going on, this and that, and then the dad just abruptly says, "Hey, I'm the one that took your chalice."
Right. He admits to it.
Finally admits to it. And it just kind of continues to build on what you were saying earlier about, who is telling me the truth? What is happening here?
The
right?
truth.
Everything
what
is
the truth?
Everyone is kind of being deceptive now. And then they have to, like, the dad is like, well, I'm going to go out now and find Caleb. It's raining now.
Right.
And the mom's like, this is, basically a suicide mission. We need to go get help and all this. And he's like, oh,
no, I'm going to go out. I can do it.
Help is days away because I got to go all the way to town. And of course the horse is gone now.
Right. No horse.
And so then they have this conversation outside of the cabin, outside of Thomasin's presence for a minute there, where then it gets a little physically violent. The mom hits the dad and then kind of breaks down. The dad picks her up, takes her back into the cabin. And then there's a sequence there where Thomasin is kind of tending to the dad's injury on his face. The mom is with the two kids. And then there's this sequence that is interesting because Thomasin basically then is like, well, hey, have we bedded down the goats for the night or whatever? And mother, I'm just here to please you. And the mother takes her and kisses her. So you're like,
yeah, Thomasin is like, she volunteers to go bed down the goats, which would seem like a trivial thing considering that Caleb's missing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she is, in whatever she can, Thomasin wants to try to curry favor with her mom to try to smooth things over. And so the mom is glad that Thomasin's going to take care of this dreary chore.
Right. And
which really has to be done.
And then goes out and, of course, is going to deal with the goats. But then who shows up? Naked Caleb in great distress. And she takes him inside. They get him up to this bedroom area or whatever.
Yeah, the top of the house.
The top of the house.
Yeah, the attic, yeah.
And they do a bleeding on him, which is great.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, and it's interesting that they do that because I think almost like the mother at that point, I think, was like pretty convinced that there's witchy business going on here. And so I'm going to try some white magic kind of, because what were they chopping up or using that grinder on in that little bowl that she had? And then she wraps that linen around him.
Right. Very hot linen.
Yeah.
Right.
And then she gets the knife and the bowl and she does the bloodletting on him.
Yes. And she cuts him by his left temple, and that's a lot of blood.
Yeah.
I'm just like, poor Caleb, So,
yeah, and actually we overlooked one other sequence that I think is important to point out. So prior to this entire sequence, there is a sequence at a riverside where the dad's clothing needed to be washed, and so Thomasin is washing it.
Thomas's taking care of that chore.
And then Caleb was sent to the shore to get a bucket of water.
Fetch water.
And then there's this scene where, again, Caleb is kind of leering at Thomasin, and Thomasin's like, "What's wrong with you? Come over here." And
she uses the word dallying, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
Why are you dallying?
And then the Mercy shows up, and that creepy little girl.
She has a creepy little thing.
So she's got this like twig that's like shaped like a broomstick, and she's pretending she's a witch, and she's accusing Thomasin of, you're the witch that took Sam away, and she's doing this little clickety clackety. Remember that little thing she was saying? Yep. And then there's this major conflict where Thomasin is basically like, "Yep, you know what? I am the witch. And if you don't shut up, I'm going to just send you away, just like I'm going to send everyone else away."
Yep.
And kind of roughs up the kid a little bit.
And Mercy, she gets quiet.
She does.
She's scared.
Right.
Mercy's scared.
And it just is another piece of setting the thing of you can't trust anybody now in your family kind of deal, because now Thomasin has said, "I'm the witch," even though we know she isn't.
Yeah, we know she isn't because it was a different person
Mm-hmm.
holding the baby.
Yeah, and
Yes.
that leads us now to this sequence we're about to talk about with Caleb essentially on his deathbed. And this brings up kind of what you were talking about earlier, where the kids can't say their prayers anymore.
Right.
And so they are obviously a Puritan family. They decide to join hands and pray, and they're starting to say the Lord's Prayer. Thomason can say it, the mom can say it, the dad can say it, and suddenly both of the twins decide, oh, I've forgotten the words. I can't
Right.
say it. And then they pull a little Salem witch trial where they're collapsing to the ground and flopping around.
Right. They're on the ground and kind of doing nothing.
Mm-hmm. And
But
that
they're not participating though.
right.
Right.
And so that sequence right there to me kind of illustrated, or at least led me to believe more, that Black Phillip is really kind of pulling the strings here. Hey kids, wouldn't it be funny if you did this cool thing? Wouldn't it be neat if you did that? Yeah, listen to Black Phillip. I'm your king. Yeah, just this will be fun.
Right.
Because because there's Thomason is clearly not a witch. The mom is not a witch. The dad is not a witch. Caleb is bewitched, but is not a witch.
Yeah. None of them are.
And they're just kind of, and I think they're being kind of commanded by Black Phillip to do this, to continue to foster this distrust in this family and this confusion.
Right. And I think the whole thing, everyone, see this. I think this movie again. They're direct. They don't talk about it. They don't say it. But I think good storytelling is you just kind of like you just show it visually.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie is showing it visually, is that there's distrust among the family. And so whenever there's distrust, the person in authority is going to start losing legitimacy, and the father is losing control of his family. He is losing legitimacy with Thomason. He's definitely lost it with Catherine, his wife, and Mercy and Jonas. They're listening to a goat,
Right.
the dad is no longer in charge.
Right.
So
and
that's a big deal.
It's very telling too, because Caleb ends up spitting up this apple. His jaw gets locked, and they unlock his jaw, and this apple gets spit up.
Right.
Which, again, highlighting the liars, welcome to deception, and now I'm going to get you kind of thing. But what does that dad ultimately do during the entire death sequence? Caleb is proclaiming his love for God, starts laughing, and then he dies. The mom is freaking out. The twins are just doing their little game, but the dad is just kind of off to the side, where it's almost like this is his realization now that I've kind of lost control of everything, and all of these ideas I had about living piously and religiously and
right.
I
know better than anybody else.
Right. And that was it. And he can no longer do anything. There's no solution, which leads me to the wood chopping. There's three sequences, I believe, in this film where he is just going to town on splitting wood with this axe.
Right.
And right after this sequence, there is another sequence of him
chopping
wood, because I look at it as, this is a thing I can control. I can split this wood.
And I can do it well.
And I just failed miserably with my son Caleb up there and my whole family.
Right. And it's super physical. I can see it's this massive release of energy for him. So just trying to keep it together.
Yeah.
By chopping wood.
And so then the mom now, over the corpse of her dead son, Caleb, basically screams at Thomason, "You're the witch. Get out of here."
Right.
And then that leads us to...
Yeah, Thomason and Catherine are done.
Yeah.
That's over.
Yeah. And so she kind of gets told to go away.
Right.
And this then ultimately leads William to confront Thomason. And this is one of the more powerful scenes in the whole film, as far as your point about holding all these secrets back. And keeping in mind, of course, these are Puritans. And so Thomason's behavior there is very un-Puritan-like.
Yeah, this brings up a point that... Again, it's I think horror movies, and I think it's the power of horror movies. I think unlike any other kind of movie genre, you could watch a great drama and Shawshank Redemption, whatever, but you don't even from that movie walk away and kind of are self-contemplative. No, you're not. But this movie can make you think about your own life, and that scene that you're alluding to between William and Thomason, because William loves his daughter. But there's and Robert Edgers in his commentary brings up a point of, he calls it female enlightenment. And you just have to wonder, because in Puritan society, well, witches are women. Why are witches women?
Mm-hmm.
The Salem witch trial. No, it wasn't the Salem warlock trial.
Right.
It was the Salem witch trial. So this whole thing of female enlightenment, and there's this big scene. William confronts Thomason, and they start talking about the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But then Thomason, I think William wants Thomason to admit that she is engaging in witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's his goal. But Thomason's not a witch. And so, but she gets enlightened, and she leaves her roles. I think the Puritan society was very based on roles.
Yep.
You stayed in your role. And that's why I think, it was bad for Caleb, because it was hard for him to stay in his role as this young. He wanted to become the father and go get the animals in the traps. But then Thomason turns around and throws the truth back at him. So is that truth when you took Caleb into the woods? Is that truth when you sold the chalice and you didn't tell? Is that, he just throws it right back into him.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, William, who had gone out of his way to say to Thomason, my girl, he commands her to stop. And Thomason also says, you're a poor farmer.
Mm-hmm.
You can't bring crops to bear, I think is the phrase.
Yeah.
You can't bring crops to bear. You can't hunt. She just straight to his face tells him eye to eye, and then William can't handle it, because it is the truth. And William knows it's the truth, but,
His pride.
it's pride. His what am I saying? His colossal pride. I mean, he just can't take it. So he turns on Thomason, calls her a bitch. That just, to me, was like, that's just horror right there. Is that someone that you love, all of a sudden, boom, 180.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that leads to Thomason basically saying, you need to talk to the twins here.
Right.
Why are you talking to me about being a witch? You need to talk
You
to the
need to talk to
twins.
the
They're talking
twins.
to the goat. They're talking to Black Phillip.
They're talking to Black Phillip, and now Black Phillip now becomes ascendant, because the family has fallen to such a level that Black Phillip now, his powers now can be significant.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think it brings up a point, is that, and that's why horror can impact your own life. I think that we could relate to it on our personal level, is that I think in the classic sense, in this movie is a classic tragedy where a person has a fall, they have a personal downfall, but the personal downfall is not the result of forces outside, but it's the result of that person's own choices.
Right.
And certainly William's own choices have led to his fall, but not only to his fall, and it's truly horror, but to the fall and destruction of his entire family.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's all in William.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
well,
it's
and
like-
he does basically admit that later on.
He does.
But in this sequence, then, the twins are still in their comatose state. And William is then like, Catherine, get the bill hook, because I'm going to cut me some kids here. And that, amazingly enough, pulls them out of their coma.
Right, they wake up right away.
Right, and screaming, and they're screaming and all this. And so then the next sequence is William has had enough, and he's boarding all of the kids, Thomason, Mercy, and Jonas, up in the barn.
With Black Phillip.
With Black Phillip.
In the barn. He boards them up in the barn.
And so there's a great scene there then.
It's crazy.
A great camera shot of the twins. And if you haven't seen the movie before, man, these twins are just kind of creepy. They just really are. I hate to say it, because they're just little kids, but they just have them. They have them looking right for this kind of movie, because they just look creepy, and they're kind of sitting off to the right, and Black Phillip is kind of closer to the camera and just being a goat, right? But this is a really creepy shot. And then they have a conversation, the twins and Anya Taylor-Joy, Thomason, where it's just, they ask her, are you a witch? And she's like, no, I'm not. Are you a witch? They don't answer that question. Do you talk to Black Phillip? They don't answer that question. And then that scene kind of fades off at that point. But and this is basically coming up on the end of the film
Right.
because
Nothing's over yet.
basically evil has won at this point because the evil is being much more open now.
Right. Well, let me say, evil is close to winning, but
Right.
they haven't crossed the line yet.
Right.
But they're there.
But then, and I don't remember if it was raining again or not, but it probably was.
So lots of rain.
Yeah. And then we have this sequence where the mother rises from her slumber.
As a dream.
You don't really know yet, but
You don't know yet.
You do know as it goes. It's something. Is it a dream? Is it reality? Don't know. But it does show what's sitting. Did you catch that? What's sitting on that nightstand table?
Chalice.
The silver chalice is there. So it's like, okay, this is
It has to
not
be a dream.
This is not reality.
Right, not reality.
And then, of course, who's sitting in a chair there as well? It's Caleb holding Samuel.
And they're both alive.
And the mother
Just overjoyed.
is overjoyed, has this conversation. Caleb's like, hey, I brought a book along. Would you like to read it
Book.
with me?
Yes,
Right.
a book. Yes, I brought a book.
And then the mom's like, oh, I'll get to that in a minute, but Sam is hungry, so I'm going to breastfeed him. And then it cuts to the barn where there's some noises on the roof maybe, and then there's noises on the ground, and the twins are kind of being like, ooh, something's going on.
You notice
there.
that they're all looking up at the roof
Yeah.
there?
Right.
Again, the movie doesn't show anything.
Right.
So
And then it cuts to Thomason.
there's
and they're-
something on the roof.
and then there's something kind of messing with our goat. Not Black Phillip, but one of the sheep or the goats, one of the other goats, right?
Yeah, they have two goats.
Yeah. And it turns out it's some horrible witch there.
Right. There's a witch with them in the barn. Who's
Kind of
milking the goat.
drinking some blood from the goat.
Yeah, earlier they had Thomason had been milking the goat, and instead of like milk coming out of the goat, the udder there's blood.
Right,
blood's
just
coming
showing
out.
the
Right.
continued
So now this witch-
desecration of the farm. Yeah.
Right now, this witch is with them, milking the goat, drinking the blood.
Right, and so you get this quick shot of the witch doing that, and then it cuts.
Old ugly witch.
Yeah, cuts
Horrible.
back to Catherine, the mother, who believed she was breastfeeding Samuel, but she's actually having her breast poked at by a raven.
A huge raven. My gosh, it's a horror movie.
Yeah, yet another
It's a
creature
horror
that
movie.
that witches can transform into. So, then basically it cuts to William waking up.
Yeah, and now it's morning.
And it's morning
here it
time,
comes.
and he
Here it comes.
kind of crosses over his wife to get out of bed because he's kind of up against the wall there, and you see that from her nightgown there's blood from her breast area there, which is why it's like, well, what really did happen there?
Right.
Was it a dream or did it really happen? And then he walks out and immediately discovers that the barn has been destroyed. The two
Right. There's a big hole in the roof of the barn.
the two
The door's open.
yeah.
The planks that he put up have been pushed out.
completely pulled down. The
goats are dead.
Two goats are dead. Black Phillip is not dead, but the two Black Phillip's you can't see him right now.
can't
But
see
the
him,
two other
but he
goats
is
are
around.
definitely dead.
You can't see the kids though. The
Right.
Kids
The
are nowhere to
the
be found.
twins are gone, but Thomason is there, which again
Right.
is still yep. You're gonna just go down the road of Thomason's this horrible witch or whatever. Or at least that's what you think is going to be the confrontation there.
Mm-hmm.
She's kind of waking up from her stupor, and William kind of looks up to the sky, and then bam, out of nowhere, Black Phillip just gores him.
Yeah.
And
Punctures his abdomen with his curved horns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, blood all over the place.
yep, and
Yeah.
behind William, because of course, as I said earlier, there's all these sequences of him chopping wood. There's this giant wood pile of all this chopped wood that he has been saving up.
Mm-hmm.
And William grabs an axe.
See, right here, I think at that moment he still could have killed Black Phillip easily,
Mhm.
but he doesn't.
No.
So I think it's like he could have still saved his family, what was left of them, but he surrenders, which brings up another huge point, I think, is that it brings up the points of, like, is there a point at which you would surrender your faith, or a point? Is there a breaking point? Like, what is your breaking point? Do you have a breaking point? But this William, he's broken.
Well, and I'm wondering about that scene too, because
Yeah.
prior to that, there was a sequence with William basically speaking to God through prayer, saying, "It's all my fault. I'm too prideful.
He admits his pride.
Please
late, though.
save my family," and this, that, and the next thing. And so then in this sequence, your point is definitely valid. My thought was, because he says, the line of dialogue he says right before Black Phillip really takes him out was what? Do you remember? Was it corruption?
Yeah, you mentioned corruption. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And so is that him willingly accepting what he believes to be punishment from God? Or was corruption basically, I am now seeing, the gates of hell, I'm seeing the damage that I have wrought with my misinterpretation of faith, and I'm going to just let this goat kill me because that is the punishment that God has put in place for me.
Yeah, I think he could have fought for his family, but he doesn't.
Right.
He mentions corruption, but of course the world is corrupt. Our faith is faith in God and things above, that no matter what happens, God will be there with me. He surrenders that completely. He acknowledges the corruption that exists within him, and he surrenders to his fate.
Yeah.
He doesn't fight back. He easily could have killed Black Phillip, but he doesn't.
Right.
And then Black Phillip comes up, medium-sized goat, not a huge goat, but still. God runs up to him, hits him with his horns, knocks him into this big, huge pile of wood that he had created. Of course, he has a big pile of wood because he's been chopping wood all the movie. And the wood falls on him, and that's the end of William.
Right, and of course, how classic storytelling is that, where the woodpile he built the entire show is now collapsing down around him along with his entire family.
Right, right.
And so
it destroys him.
Right, and so Thomason then
straw, if you will.
is heading towards the dad and to check on him, and then out of nowhere, Catherine is confronting Tom. Actually, grabs her hair and pulls her up, and just really is doing a masterful acting performance, because holy crap, she was just off the deep end with her acting right there. Just, you're the witch, and you've ruined our family, and your
family's gone. Everyone's gone.
You looked at my husband. You're a whore. All this stuff, and the mother is so over the top at this point. And I don't know if she was somehow possessed due to the wound that was afflicted upon her, and so she's really not even Catherine anymore, and she's some other entity or being taken over by that. Doesn't really matter. But there's a knockdown, drag-out fight. She's on top of Thomason. She's trying to strangle her. And, of course, Thomason is able to grab that billhook that's just conveniently laying right there.
Right.
Hits her with it, kind of cuts her temple. And, again, it's the red color, the blood. And, of course, very vivid. All over, kind of splashing all over her face. It's not enough to stop the mom, so she hits her a couple more times with that billhook, and then that's the end of the mom.
Right. And that brings up a great point, is that William and Thomason did have a special relationship, and Catherine, sees that, and I think that's great that, the director brings that up, because it shows that she has seen that, she has internalized it, and yet instead of talking about it and being open about it and having clarity and openness, she holds it in. She holds that jealousy in. And then finally, at this moment of crisis, it comes boiling out of her, and it's a huge accusation. But again, it's just the destruction of this family. It's self-wrought, because they're existing in this very structured Puritan existence. They all have their roles, but there's no talking. There's no talking about what's really going on in my life. There's, in a way, you could even say, I think, that there's no even really true love, even, because of course they do have love and they love each other, but if you don't talking about your true feelings, then it leads to a sense of isolation. And a close family should not be like that. You should be able to feel open about going to other people, and having that trust. And clearly by the end of the movie, there's zero trust. It's
Right.
all gone. All these secrets have destroyed not only their faith in God, but, physically destroyed them,
Yep.
so. Yeah. And I think another thing is the breaking of rules. I touched on the female enlightenment earlier. And clearly, this movie is Thomason's enlightenment, as she gets older. And she, of course, going back a little bit, she confronts William, and then their relationship is ruined. And so, but I think it's a lot of themes that are present even today. This whole, female enlightenment. So, what's going on today with, like Roe versus Wade is like, maybe I need to put females back in their place, like maybe they have too many rights. It's just like maybe females getting enlightened is a little scary.
I'm pro female enlightenment.
Yeah, of course, of course. But this movie definitely brings this up, and within the confines of that super strict Puritan
Right.
family and structure,
And that was it. A lot
and
of division.
their faith,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and their faith at the time. And it brings a lot of questions about religion and yeah, it's unsettling.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, she's just killed her mother,
She kills her mother.
and then
She's got nothing. Everyone's gone.
everyone's
She's got
gone.
nothing.
She's just out there by herself. She kind of walks back into the cabin. She removes her big clothing, lots of lace things in the front.
Right.
She has to unlace, almost like, I'm kind of done with this Puritan thing now. Let me get out of this Puritan garb.
Right. Again, the Enlightenment,
Mhm.
perhaps. But there's another clue there is that this is not a poor person's clothes.
Right.
It's richly made. It's thick material. It just shows the descent of this family.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then she kind of just lays her head down on the table. There's a passage of time there where it's night now. She hears kind of a chiming noise. And so she walks out into the front area there, sees Black Phillip chilling by the barn.
Right. Black Phillip.
And again, a beautifully shot scene. It's lit primarily by just the candle she's holding. Black Phillip kind of walks into the barn. She follows, and she confronts Black Phillip, and she's like, "Hey, can you talk? Because I need to talk to you. If I command you to talk."
Right.
All this stuff, and
Right.
and she's still covered in blood and stuff from the mother. And just as she's about to leave, what happens? Well, oh my gosh, Black Phillip starts talking to her.
Black Phillip talks. Yep. Gotta love it. Gotta love it.
And so he basically is like, well, what do you want? I can give you this really nice butter. I can give you some dresses. I can give you, you can live deliciously is the word.
Right.
'Cause
Yeah, but what's the phrase? It's like, what do you want? And then Thomason says, well, what can you do?
Right. What can you offer?
What can you offer?
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, well, I can offer you butter to live deliciously. Yeah. To travel the world.
Travel. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then it's
Yep.
just, you just have to, here's my book. You can check it out, sign this book.
Yeah, but I need you to sign the book.
And
then she
then-
confesses, I can't sign my name.
Right. And at this point, then, when the book shows up, you see this booted figure
Right.
walking by. And
Black
so,
Phillip's no longer goat.
Right. Black Phillip is not Black Phillip anymore. And in incredible shadows, you see him kind of lingering around her. He puts his hand on her.
He puts his gloved hand on her right shoulder.
And he's like, hey, I can guide your hand to sign this
I can
thing.
guide your hand.
Hey, let's get you out of these clothes, these restrictive clothes, right? Although no nudity is seen. But,
Right, none.
so she strips off her clothes.
Again, just wise photography and cinematography. It's really
And then
wise.
the next sequence is she's walking naked out towards the forest.
The forest.
And Black Phillip is now goat form again. He's following her. And then basically the end of the movie occurs. She wanders a little ways through the forest. She hears some chanting and
Huge
things like
raging
that.
fire.
There's a big raging fire. There's a bunch of naked witches around the fire.
Yeah, nothing's shown.
Right. They all start to levitate up into the
Right.
air. The camera is tightly focused on Thomason's face at that point where she goes through, and I'll get Jean's opinion on what she's going through there, but it's almost like fear and then joy of
No,
what she's
there's
going
joy.
through as
There's
she
joy.
kind of levitates up, and then the movie ends.
Yeah, again, great cinematography is that she levitates to a higher point than the other ones, you know. And so, yeah, no, she is, her levitation, her rising through the air is definitely thrilling and exciting for her. You know, it's yeah. Again, got to go back to this female enlightenment thing. It's like she's like waking up. It's
Right.
like her eyes are open for the first time. You know, but are her eyes opened to goodness and bright and joy and family and true love? No, her eyes are opened to the devil,
Right.
right, and to the devil's promises, right.
But it's also like kind of that situation where if everyone tells you you're this, you end up just going down that road, right?
Right. Everyone
know?
told her that she was a witch, and so
Mhm.
finally it's like, oh, maybe I'll give this a shot. I'll talk to the goat,
Right.
you know, because this other thing with trying to be follow God, that's certainly not working out. Look how that worked out.
Right.
You know, my family's dead. I'm starving, and yeah, let's just try this Black Phillip thing out.
And I think on some level it is about the oppression of the Puritan society at that time. I mean, Puritans don't really exist now, of course, but
Yeah, but I'll just throw this in there though. I was like, our culture, our modern American culture, is founded on Puritan ideals. It's founded on their beliefs and their principles, and our modern American society very puritanical. Oh yeah,
right.
Oh yeah, have we really progressed that far?
Right.
You know, again, horror movie, it makes you think about these modern things. You know, I love this movie. This movie, 50 years from now, will still be super valid, super challenging.
Right. This is,
if you're willing to look at it at that level.
it's an absolute masterpiece, no
Yeah,
question about it.
yeah.
Robert Eggers has gone on to do The Lighthouse and The Northman.
Right.
The Lighthouse I've seen, it's fine. Nothing is ever going to touch The Witch as
Yeah,
far
The
as,
Witch, right.
it's. This is almost like this guy has been waiting his whole life to make this movie.
Right.
Because it
Did
is
a lot of
just
research
such
on
a
it.
masterpiece. And we do need to mention the score by
Yeah, the score tells a lot. Yeah.
oh man, I cannot remember the guy's name. Is it Mark Corvell? Corvell?
My notes.
But amazing, and that score hits from the first scene on, and it's all throughout the movie, and
Right.
it's unique and different in almost every scene. It really sets the tone, because one of the things that maybe people don't realize about this film is the tone is so dark, and it starts dark and it just gets darker and darker and darker and darker, and then it just kind of stops and the movie's over. And so unlike a lot of other horror movies, more mainstream horror movies where it's kind of a thrill ride and a roller coaster ride, this is
Or
just,
even like there's even maybe a victory at the end where like there's one survivor and the survivor emerges victorious.
right.
The survivor lives. No, none of that.
No, right, yeah,
None of
it's
that
just
there.
a really
No.
dark movie, and for those of us who are really into horror a lot, you definitely need to see this movie because it is so dark and desolate, and
Yeah.
just like I've mentioned it a couple times, how the colors are all washed out
Yeah.
except for red, but this score all throughout the movie is just highlighting and upping that fear, upping that tension. It's just a real masterwork of a score.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing I do want to point out, Gene, I watched all of the credits just to see. Did you realize there was a credit for a mental health counselor? They had a mental health counselor
Really?
on set for this movie. And
Well, it fits.
it does,
totally
because
fits.
I'm like going,
My gosh.
because the acting in this, even from the children, is just top notch. I mean, just they will never do a better performance than what they did in this. But the intensity with which they had to do some of these performances, I could see the director going, Yeah, can you go over to the shack over there
Yeah,
and
go
talk
over
to
there
the
and talk to
mental
get
health
your head
counselor?
straightened
Yeah,
out, right?
because
Yeah.
man, like in even that sequence where the mom is confronting Thomason at the end, where that actor, it's like you are just messed up so bad right now, so intense.
This movie has so many super intense scenes.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great point, and I think it points up to the horror of this movie. But I think, again, go back, good horror makes you think about yourself. But I think, like a lot of horror, like we're never going to be, like we talked about Alien on a spaceship,
Mm-hmm.
we're never going to be living in Puritan England. But, each of us can experience horror. And I think horror could be, in the movie, the way again, the cinematography, so much is told by what is not said.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie, I think that can really mess you up when things are happening, but no one's talking about them. Yeah, this whole movie is about that.
Mm-hmm.
And as like as an actor, I think that can play with your head.
Mm-hmm. Well, and 93 minutes long. That's all this movie is.
Yeah.
And man, it's
gets to the point.
Yeah, and it's really intense. And I was joking with Gene that I was going to compare this to a movie that he probably doesn't like and will be surprised that I compare it to.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about this.
But
yeah,
obviously, The Witch is kind of in the realm of a movie like Rosemary's Baby as far as tone. But when you're talking strict tone, as I
have to confess, I saw Rosemary's Baby when I was like 12.
Right.
I don't remember it at all.
Yeah, and that's not the one I'm actually going to compare it
Okay.
to. That's going to just freak you out, or maybe it won't. But when we're talking just tone of the film and this descent into darkness
Here it
that
comes.
doesn't ever let up, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, okay.
That movie starts with a corpse, and the next scene is here's a dead armadillo as the truck drives by, and it just keeps getting darker and darker and darker and darker, and nothing positive happens. And it's a similar ending, in my opinion, because Sally is in the truck driving away.
Sally lives, though.
She's been rescued.
She has redemption.
She's
right?
covered in blood. She's gone over the deep end as insane now, laughing maniacally like a crazy person. So the two endings to me were very similar in that they were just they just stop. And
Interesting.
And it's just the tone. So I just wanted to hit Gene with that because anytime I can talk about Texas Chainsaw.
Texas Chainsaw. Yeah, again, I have to say, I did see Texas Chainsaw when I was a kid. I remember I was hanging out with a bunch of cousins, and we went to it shows how old I am, but we went to a drive-in theater in Denver, Colorado. And I remember, I don't know, this is about The Witch, but anyway, fleeting memories of that movie.
Yeah, but anyway.
I don't really remember hardly anything, though.
I
think
knew
I was hanging out in the concession stand the whole time.
I knew this episode would be our longest one. It certainly is. But The Witch certainly deserves it if you have not seen this film.
That's great.
My God, you need to watch it.
Yeah.
It is definitely a masterwork of horror.
Yeah. Maybe leave the kids at home though.
Yeah, it's it's definitely not for a 14-year-old to be watching this one. They'd either get bored or too scared, and we can't do that to poor Jamie again. So hopefully Jamie will be with us next week. I believe we're going to do Event Horizon next week, which is much more traditional. So hey, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you the next time.
All right,
Bye.
See you later. Bye.